Welcome everyone to the captive audience. We're doing it at a special time tonight, 6:30, because we have a special guest. We have State Representative Ed Deal from House District 17, and frankly, one of the most articulate and knowledgeable guys on a wide range of issues which affect our state. So we're so pleased to have you with us tonight here, Representative Deal.
You bet. Great to be back with you, Kevin.
So we kind of promised our viewers that we would give them kind of a mini voter guide to the measures, and that we'd also dig into a few issues relating to the election. One thing I want to mention up front, because it's good to mention now and good to mention again at the end, is today, the 15th of October, is the voter registration deadline. If you are not yet registered to vote in this election for some reason, then you need to go do that. And you can go to OregonVotes.gov. That's OregonVotes.gov, and I'll put it in here, .gov. And actually, the first thing you want to do when you get there is just click on the big banner that says register to vote. And I think if you've got a driver's license or a state voter ID, it's super easy and it takes like 2 minutes. If not, then there's a few more steps you have to go through, but that's still the best place to go. So please do that by midnight. And if you haven't updated your address, if you've moved recently, or if you've gotten married and your name's changed, that kind of stuff you can actually do all the way till 8 p.m. on election night and still get a ballot and vote it. But it's probably a good idea to get it done sooner versus later, because ballots are not forwarded. So you will not receive a ballot, even though you can still update that information between now and election evening. And ballots get mailed tomorrow. So people will start receiving them Thursday, Friday, Saturday, etc. Anyway, that little commercial for voter registration.
And registering to vote is so easy in Oregon, even non-citizens can do it.
That's right. In large numbers. I believe at last count it was 1,500 something.
That's just, we don't really even know, Kevin.
No, that's what they had to admit, right?
Yeah, we don't know. We're an attestation state. You check the box that says you're a citizen, and nobody checks. Nobody checks.
The one thing they should check, they don't. There's no other profound criteria besides that.
I know. And the DMV was checking some registrants, the ones that went through their process, but we already found out that process wasn't working.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start out with that here and just talk through it, because a lot of folks don't know the details of what happened. There was an article a couple days ago Nigel Jaquist did on the Department of Transportation's DMV services. They did a candid 7-page self-evaluation acknowledging the mistakes that caused the agency to improperly register 1,561 non-citizens to vote. However, there was also that report that the governor, Tina Kotek, saw, and then immediately last week decided to suspend automatic voter registration through the DMV, which, I was out knocking doors in Eugene just the other day, and there was a gentleman who said his daughter had just gotten her license. She's 16, so she couldn't vote yet. He said that they generally opted out, which you have, so you get automatically registered unless you opt out. That's how it works in this state. But then I encountered another gentleman who said he had just moved here 2 weeks ago, and he said, but he was going to go get his driver's license done, and that should take care of it. And I said, actually, maybe not. You might want to double down on that one. And we told him where the Lane County elections office was, to get it sorted, because that's actually, because they registered non-citizens, they're penalizing citizens who just are the only
Right.
intended beneficiaries of automatic voter registration.
Yeah, it's really sad that they had no real checks and balances to make sure that they had a really solid process. It just baffles me that the Secretary of State wasn't auditing the DMV process. I and what's even more frustrating is, I've been asking these questions. I've only been in there for 2 years now. I've been asking these questions. Some of my colleagues have been asking these questions a lot longer than me, and they were told, "Oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine." They told Rep Wallen that. They told Rep Scharf that everything's fine.
Well, they can actually called you names, right? Like, by
Yeah,
the way, how dare you undermine
yeah.
people's confidence in our election system by even suggesting that this could be the
In
case?
fact, if you suggest it, we're going to monitor your social media, record that, and track it. By the way, I have a bill for that to prevent that
Oh,
from happening. So we'll see if that works. But
yeah, because
yeah, they were
legislatively,
very, I'd say, indignant about the whole thing. And then you discover this and realize they had no controls. It's embarrassing. But the problem is bigger than this 1,500 votes or 1,500 ballots, whatever it is.
when it's systematic, when they can't prove that they have a system that doesn't reproduce this result,
Yeah.
then without a voter roll wide audit.
That's what it will take, really, because the majority of voters in Oregon did not go through the DMV motor voter process. I think over 2.5 million have just gone through the regular process. And again, we're an attestation state. You check the box on the form, either electronically or on paper, and we assume you're a citizen. There's no, if you walk into the secretary or the clerk's office today and register to vote, they are not checking your citizenship. I think that would surprise a lot of people that that's not the case, but it is not the case.
Well, it goes further than that because at the federal level, something interesting was going on. At the federal level, there was a bill in Congress that called the SAVE Act, and it was
Yes.
and it actually passed the House of
Mhm.
Representatives, and it was meant to simply give teeth to this notion that only citizens would be allowed to vote. And many Democrats, including Val Hoyle, that's why I know about it, voted against it, saying, well, she didn't explain her vote at all. She just voted the way, the party bosses tell her. But the people who said, well, I'm voting no, the reason why is because it's already illegal, which is like, so if you say the speed limit is 45, but you have no mechanism for systematically checking at all whether anybody is doing 45 miles an hour, and there's no enforcement. It's if the officer stops you and says, I'm concerned you might have been going fast, I'm like, I attest to the fact that I was doing 45 miles an hour, and that's all that it takes.
Yeah.
That's what we have with voter registration. And you will have people doing 110 miles an hour in a 45.
It's just absurd on its face. So some other representatives and I, Rep Junker, Rep Scharf, Rep Reschke, I believe all four of us are going to introduce a version of the SAVE Act for the state of Oregon. So
That's great.
we'll see where that goes. But yeah, we know we have a problem. We know that there's no standard set of tools that the clerks have to automate the process of checking for for citizenship. The tool set that they use, you'd think they would have tools just similar to what employers have. E-Verify. They don't have access to E-Verify.
Yeah, in fact, they've got laws and they've got regulations that say you can't even ask that question.
No, you can't.
So it's willful ignorance. It's like see no evil, hear no evil,
Yeah.
and
And I don't know the history of this. I'm sure at one time we all agreed that this was okay, but that was before we had, in a period of 3.5 years, 16, maybe 20 million people cross our border. Things are way different now. This is a real serious issue that I expect to get resolved quickly.
Well, and if it doesn't, then I think you take it to the voters, right? You have to take the
Yeah.
current lousy voter rolls and you put this as a ballot initiative on the ballot, and you say, good, we're going to ask the voters if they think citizens should be the only ones voting, and we're going to do it with voter rolls that might have people who are not citizens on it.
Right.
That sounds like Oregon. I'm not sure that that anyone ever agreed that this is a good idea, the way it was being done, but it was simply done anyway without listening to or having a balanced debate about checks and balances and
Yeah.
audits.
Yeah.
Which I remember watching it year after year, and it seemed like every year, there was another set of laws and election rules that were put into place that sort of made it looser and looser and looser. I remember when online voter registration first came along, and what could go wrong with that? Well, I don't know. Let's look at all the IT projects the state runs and completely screws up to the point that they waste hundreds of millions of dollars and have breaches.
And people, I think most people are aware now, but last year, the DMV had a data breach, the Move It IT data breach. 3.5 million Oregonians had their identities stolen. Their full name, their address, their driver's license number, the last 4 digits of their social security number. A few thousand of them had their digital signature stolen. So you have all the information you need to go in and wreak havoc with voter registration just through that data breach.
And they knew that this was a problem. I don't think this is a mystery. They didn't have to have somebody hack the system to know that they had problems, because these are the same people that, because of a computer system, could not dispense unemployment benefits for the better part of 2 years in the middle of a crisis, because they were using systems that were so old that they had to go and get programmers who had retired more than 10 years ago to come out of retirement to fix the code.
The code is, nobody uses the code anymore.
Well, that's right. You know all about code and stuff too. I mean, just in a past life, I was immersed in that. I think it was some form of COBOL or something. And they just it's spaghetti code. It's like it's like watching one of these movies, a dystopia, where they have this, 56 Packard that this guy just keeps running, and it's got like, duct tape and dental floss and chewing gum, keeping it like jumping jalopy. That's what they got.
We have to be willing to make those investments to update those systems. And I don't know the history of it, but clearly those investments weren't made.
Well, this after action report by DMV in paragraph 3 on the first page says IT system change at DMV. On July 6, 2020, DMV launched the second half of a major information technology transformation, rolling out the driver's system following the new vehicle system going live in 2019. And they replaced a mainframe green screen legacy system where the staff manually keyed in all input data with a modern user interface. I mean, I just read this and I'm just like, this just reads like somebody was just like, they're not in the 21st century. No one does that.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. It's classic.
But I do want to say one thing, because people say this are like, it's just hopeless to vote. And it's like, no, it's not.
No, that's the tough part about talking about this stuff right before the election.
Yeah.
The thing we have to remember, we can overwhelm them with votes. How many thousands of Oregonians, conservative Oregonians, didn't vote in the last election?
That's right.
We lost the House, the Oregon House, by 4,267 votes. 4,267 votes. Some of these districts we lost by just around 200 votes. We have the votes. We have the votes to win a majority in the House if people turn out to vote.
Yeah, and vote down your ballot. You know, don't just say
Yeah.
I voted at the top of the ballot and I'm calling it good and I don't know who these other people are. But you know, these other people on that ballot, those are the people that actually decide what happens in your everyday lives. You know,
That's right.
we found that out during COVID, right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. So I hope people are not disillusioned. That's the fear I have is they hear this and they go, it doesn't make any sense to vote. No, your vote absolutely does matter. There's enough of us here to I fully, if we do the right things, we're going to pick up seats in the House. That's what I'm working very hard on every day, to make sure that we're doing the right things to get some more representation in the House, and that takes all of us. If you haven't volunteered yet to knock on doors or make phone calls, if you haven't written a check to a candidate yet, do it. Even if it's a small check, do it. Every bit matters, and we're down to the wire right now.
Yeah, this is like we spent a lot of time in these elections kind of building up the little machine. Every candidate is a little machine kind of hurtling towards the end point. And some of the bigger races, they're like, you know, jet fighters. I mean, they're consuming a lot of resources, but they're taking on big fights. And in all of them, none of them can do what they do without fuel.
Right.
Because actually, people say, well, there's so much money in politics. Well, actually, compared to a $25 trillion economy, it's really not that much money that's going into politics. It's dwarfed any day of the week by what's spent on advertising soap. It is nothing compared to what's spent on getting people to choose one pickup truck over another. It is nothing compared to what we see being spent every day to convince people that they should bank with one bank or another. The budgets that are spent are 10 to 20 times the size of what's spent on politics. However, the reason why there's money in politics is because the TV stations don't give you free TV time, and the post office doesn't give you free postage. It all costs money to reach people. And most people don't pay attention. They're watching 20 different news sources. 3/4 of them tell them garbage that we encounter when we talk to them. They're like, you think what? Really? Yeah, no. The border's not secure. I've seen it. It's not secure. And fentanyl's coming across it, you know, and so you have to deprogram people, but you can do it if you have the resources to reach people.
I see a comment there. 40 million Christians didn't vote. I don't know the hard number. That's probably right, but 30 to 40% of Christians did not vote. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I've had people, I've knocked on people's doors where they said, I don't think I'm going to vote. And I'm like, then you get the government you deserve.
Yeah.
That's what you get. And if you think something isn't right, if you think it's a mess, you are not fixing it by saying, I think I'll just let it happen.
And if you don't think it's worth a few $1 million to defeat a ballot measure that would increase taxes annually, I think it's $6.8 billion every year. You know, it's worth a few $1 million to fight that. It's worth writing a check to help fight outrageous things like that coming down.
Well, that's a good segue. Thank you for that segue, because we should pop into the measures now, because one of the things about the measures and the one that you're referring to is if people think it doesn't matter whether that tax passes or not, regardless of how harebrained the idea that they have of what they want to do with the money, do you buy groceries, or do you just not eat? Or do you just grow your own food someplace? Because that's a microscopic fraction of the population at this point. So if you go to a grocery store who operates on margins less than 3%, for sure, then you're going to care whether this passes or not, because you're simply going to pay that. That's all that's going to happen.
And you're talking about Measure 118, which would be a 3% sales tax or gross receipts tax on all Oregon businesses making over 25 million in sales. And every single Oregonian will pay that.
Yep.
And it's a 3% tax when they harvest the lumber, when they sell the lumber, when it's put into your home. So it's a cumulative tax. It's a tax on a tax. And I think the revenue office figured it was a 1.5 to 2% increase in costs for Oregonians. And yes, you're going to get a check in the form of like a universal basic income check out of it. But what's it worth? I think it's making businesses in Oregon less competitive. It's going to drive more businesses out of the state, and it just raises the level of zero. It's like people complain about inflation right now. Why do we have inflation? Well, we printed money. We printed bucket loads of money and we handed it to people.
Yeah.
What do you think handing free money to every Oregonian will do? It's going to have an inflationary effect.
And we kept doing it when the economy, frankly, didn't need it.
Yeah.
We if everyone wants to say, well, we had to do something during COVID in 2020, yes. And by the end of 2020, the economy was roaring back and recovering out of that whole thing. Yeah. And they kept printing money for 3 years. They're still doing it.
And Measure 118 is right. They have a lot of money behind it. Most of the money supporting 118 has come from, at least during the initiative process, was out of state. 95% of the money came from California and New York. Most of that money from one guy in California. So we have one guy. So it's just another social experiment being run in Oregon. And the texts, somebody's been getting some 118 texts here. I was going to look at one that a friend of mine received, but they're so deceptive. They're marketing this thing as if it was here. Voting yes on 118 means yearly rebates, but it's a tax cut for you and small businesses that the Governor Kotek doesn't want you to have. A tax cut.
They're calling it a tax cut. Yeah.
Yes.
But it goes to people who don't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Measure 118, unions are opposed, businesses are opposed, Democrat legislators are opposed, Republican legislators are opposed. The governor is opposed. There's very few things that bring us all together. Measure 118 has brought us all together in opposition. So I hope people just vote no.
I do. And I think that the reason why this is still a concern is because what people see when they are reached with all this advertising that we were just talking about, when somebody's got, endless buckets of money to pour into a bad idea.
Yeah.
And like I was saying to you the other day, and Monique Despain said this once in a speech, so I kind of latched onto it, is Oregon must have a kick me sign on its back, because other places like New York, like Measure 110 was a Soros-based New York group that thought it was a great idea. Let's tell them that we're going to give them recovery of stuff funded by Canada.
Line to the voters.
Yeah. And then we'll pay for it. Yeah. And then those fools will be our experiment, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't have to deal with the outcome. We'll let Oregon deal with it. We're a cheap state to run a social experiment on.
And we're sometimes suckers. So this advertising reaches people. In fact, in the voters pamphlet I just posted this here, Measure 118 is being sold as free money.
Mm-hmm.
To people who might unfortunately believe that money is somehow free after the last few years of endless printing, not realizing that the more they printed money, the less you could afford to buy with that money. But here's what they say: pay yourself first. Don't leave $1,600 on the table. Do what's right for you and your family. In other words, what's left out of this is screw the economy, the hell with businesses. And by the way, this is just going to turn into inflation that's going to be paid by, you. And it's interesting because the more taxes get raised, the more you find those same states, and this is actually one of the arguments in opposition to Measure 118, the more you find that high tax states seem to be leading the homelessness category.
Mm-hmm. Well, so one of my colleagues, Senator Bonham, and I were asked the question about what's your biggest fear if Measure 118 passes. We were in a forum with some hospitals, and my answer was my biggest concern is managing the traffic as businesses flee the state.
Yeah.
And his was, my biggest concern is managing the traffic as people come into the state to collect these welfare checks. And
unproductive people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gee,
So
I wonder if
that's
homeless
the
people
risk.
will find out about it in other states that are drug addicts. I wonder if they'll find out about it.
Yeah, they'll find out about it.
Yeah. It says here, Taxpayer Association, one of the arguments in opposition, it repeats it 6 times. It says, dead people will get a rebate check. Under Measure 118, dead people will be awarded rebate checks.
They're correct. If you were alive for 200 days, yeah,
you've established residency. By the way,
established residency.
Do you think a homeless person will be able to establish 200 days of residency somewhere in Oregon?
You will self-attest. You will self-attest.
Self-attesting, huh? No audits. That's great. Well, the reason why the Democrats are opposed to it, although they're just leaving it to all the businesses to pay for opposing it, which unfortunately is draining Republican coffers, while Democrats go off and win races for office. So they are, opportunists in that regard, but they're opposing it because apparently it would also cut into state tax revenues to the point that it would, that would impact the state budget situation that they're concerned about.
Whoever wrote this really did not understand the complex nature of the Oregon tax structure.
Yeah.
And the revenue office analyzed this thing, and I think it was $1 billion. We're going to have to figure out how to make up $1 billion to the general fund. It's a significant chunk of money.
Yeah.
Which
means we'll have to raise taxes more.
We'll have to raise taxes more to make up for the loss in revenue going to the state. It's ridiculous. It's a hot mess is what it is.
Well, and they say, corporations need to pay their fair share, and they're the ones that pay for this. And I'm like, you know what? I learned this saying a long time ago. Businesses don't pay taxes. They collect taxes. If they don't do it as a sales tax, then they do it by saying, well, geez, I can't lose money or I have no reason to be in business. So when this additional cost is imposed on me that produces no value for my customers, but I can't afford to lose money in order to subsidize that, I'm just going to have to raise my prices. If I can't raise my prices, if I lose too much money, I have to go out of business or I have to leave the state. It's really simple.
That's how the cat tax is being done. That's all being passed on to consumers. This will be a tax on top of the cat tax. Unbelievable.
So that's Measure 118. Let me go ahead, and I'm just going to bring up, let's see here. I'm going to put up in front of folks here Ed's Measure Guide. Let me see here. Where do I do that? Used to be easier. Every once in a while, they I have to open it first. Here we go. So I'm going to open it, and it's a really handy little graphic. So let me see if I can get this on the screen here real quick.
I'm guessing there'd be some people that disagree with me on my first one, and I understand that.
Well, I think that's great because it's why we do this show. We don't come on and just all agree about everything, but we make sure that everybody's smarter when they're done. So let's see. Can you see that?
No,
I haven't displayed it yet. Give me a second here. Aha, here we go.
There you are.
There it is. So there's Ed's Measure Guide. So we just talked about Measure 118, and that's a no. Let's take it from the top and let's start with the
Sure.
controversial one there you were mentioning.
So yeah, 115 would allow the state legislature to impeach the governor, secretary of state, attorney general, treasurer, and bully commissioner. So statewide elected officials. And it would require a 2/3 majority in the House to impeach and 2/3 in the Senate to convict. The reason I'm okay with this, I mean, we're the only state that doesn't have this authority granted to the legislature.
49 states have it.
49 states have it. It's a 2/3 majority requirement. That's a huge bar. So I think it's a perfectly good thing for us to have. It provides us a check on statewide officials that are not doing their job or that are corrupt. You know,
It's a higher bar than the federal impeachment, by the way.
it's a very high bar. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be 40, 40 majority in the House of 60.
Yeah.
20 out of 30 in the Senate. That's a big number. The people that I've talked to that are recommending a no, they're worried about the abuse of impeachment, and that's a legitimate concern. I mean, we've seen it abused nationally. I just think that the risk is really low on this one, and if we have some conservatives are recommending a no, but I'll tell you, if we have 40 Democrats in the House and 20 in the Senate, we've got bigger issues to worry about than this. So I'm recommending a yes on that 115.
I am too. I know that some people might not have long memories about stuff, but I vividly remember what happened in 2014 with so there was a gubernatorial election. It was Dennis Richardson, the late Dennis Richardson, state representative, who later became the Secretary of State in 2016. But in 2014, he was running against John Kitzhaber. John Kitzhaber was running for his 4th term, non-consecutive. It was his 2nd consecutive term, but he had been in the 90s, the governor, 90s and early 2000s. And then, as usually happens with a lot of this stuff, it comes out after the election in full, the controversy that he had, where he was trying to, his girlfriend was a lobbyist, and the first girlfriend, or whatever they call her, and he tried to get some emails buried that were going to make it obvious that this was happening, that he was actually receiving income as a household in order to bend to a certain policy, and it was not being disclosed. And he ended up resigning 3 weeks after he was sworn into that 4th term, and that is how we got Kate Brown, who was the Secretary of State at the time, as governor. She later ran for election in 2016, and as we know, also again in 2018. But it was put right in our faces at that time that had John Kitzhaber not been pressured to resign, and I didn't even know what real pressure they had, but there was a lot of, the Democrats are very concerned that this would hang over their entire next election cycle and the legislative thing, and that it would damage them politically. So they pressured him. However, he kind of regretted resigning, and he did not have to resign. And he also could not be impeached. And that's when I first learned that there were 49 states that had it and Oregon did not. And we were powerless to do anything about it, except for holding a recall. Now, we've seen 2 recalls attempts of the governor in 2019 and 2020. The 2021 came close, but it's a gargantuan effort. It costs
It's
enormous
time
sums of money.
consuming and expensive. Yeah.
And frankly, there's no guarantee that even if it gets on the ballot that that it wouldn't turn into a circus, and
Yeah.
there'd be millions of dollars spent in the media, and we'd have to wait until the petition signature gathering took place, and then it gets on the ballot, and the vote takes place. We'd have to wait for all of that, which means that there's no rapid way for somebody who's fundamentally corrupt to be removed from office. If they're doing tremendous damage to the state, there's actually nothing you can do quickly.
Yeah. Yep. So I think it's a good idea. You're hitting on all the reasons why I would support it. I've seen some comments, is this a Democrat measure that could backfire? I believe it was a referral and it had bipartisan support. And I think I think it's just low risk of backfiring. There you have an example that the pressure that Kitzhaber faced was coming from his own party, from leadership in the Senate and leadership in the House.
Yeah.
And if he wouldn't have resigned, he
Yeah.
wouldn't have resigned, they would have brought impeachment, I would imagine.
They would have tried to pass it.
Yeah.
Now the problem there is that you would have still had to put that on the ballot and
Yeah.
pass it, but it probably would have incentivized it, and it would have hung over the whole thing. But what's interesting at the time was that this story was broken by Nigel Jaquist, and there was a whistleblower, and they went after the whistleblower. The administration tried to go after that guy, and it really would have frozen up the government for a long time. But back then an actual measure was a proposed law was brought forward. A referral was brought forward. Jody, trying to remember her name, she was a state representative back then. She's kind of gone into the lobbyist world now. Jody Hack. Yes. So Jody Hack was the chief sponsor of that. She brought it forward along with a package of other transparency and accountability measures to government, because by the way, you can lie to state government. And when you do give testimony, and there's no perjury, you just lie. And we have department heads that lie all the time to the government. And so that was like an example of something else but it was defeated on a party line basis.
Yeah.
So back then, Democrats were opposed to it. So the fact that they've come around to it means they're coming around to something that's fundamentally a Republican origin idea, dating back to 2015 when Jody brought it forward.
Yeah.
So there we go. Yes on Measure 115, but you've heard at least an assessment of the counting point of view.
Yeah.
Measure 116.
Yes, I'm recommending a no on this one. By the way, the Oregonian editorial board agrees with me on every one of these votes. Which yeah. No on everything except 115. No on the ranked choice voting, which I was very excited about because I was part of the editorial debate forum that they held to help them guide their decision making. But on 116, this establishes an independent commission of unelected people to establish the wages for elected officials, including state legislators, the governor, and other officials. The interesting thing about this is when I first read it, I go, oh, that's an independent commission that will make recommendations. The legislature sets the budgets, right? We set the budget. So we would vote on it like we would vote on any other budget item. But no, this bypasses legislative voting. What this independent commission says for salaries goes. It's placed in the budget. The legislative authority to set the budget is bypassed. And I just see this as a cop-out.
Hey, that's a bad
precedent. By legislators who want a raise and are too chicken to vote themselves a raise. So they're going to appoint some independent, quote unquote, independent commissioners to set their salaries for them. This commission, the makeup of it, isn't defined. That will be defined in statute. But you got to, without a doubt, the commission will be made up of people that are appointed that who will be impacted by the salaries they set.
Yeah.
So, I just think it's a terrible idea. I'm a hard no. I think I've convinced a few of my colleagues to go no on it as well. So,
Well, and it's a pity because if there were a real solution or a real public debate about this, I happen to think that the attorney general position in particular is grossly underpaid because I've tried to recruit people to run for attorney general, and you usually go and try
yeah,
to Republicans, we try to go and find um, people who have served as prosecutors, as district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, people with experience at enforcing the law who actually want to enforce the law,
yeah,
the kind that we want. And those folks, even assistant district attorneys, have to take a significant pay cut to go and be an attorney. Attorney general pays like 70 something thousand a year. It's terrible because you might say, well, that sounds like a good amount of money. Not if you can literally do any other job as a lawyer and make 2 to 3 times that. A typical assistant district attorney in a large county in Oregon makes somewhere on the order of $250,000 a year.
So,
And that's what the people that we want to run for those things make. And then, of course, private practice, you can make even more.
So I agree with you. Some of these positions do deserve more money. So let's have a discussion. Let's vote on it. Let's be accountable to our constituents when we do so, and not go this cop-out approach.
I agree, because that what I just described on the merits, I think you could find a bipartisan consensus
Oh,
on
heck
that
yeah,
and sign it
you
into
would.
law.
The example, I think your attorney general one is a great example. I've used the treasurer as an example. They're responsible for billions of dollars of state funds, and I think we pay them under $100,000 a year.
Yeah, if you
And
want
you,
somebody who actually
yeah,
manages money and makes
yeah,
money at doing it.
yeah, yeah.
So that's a good one. I don't. Shamia Fagan didn't deserve a larger salary. She deserved what she got, but she decided she had to take that. The salary was so bad
Had
that
to
she had
take
to
a side job.
side job, but she just picked LaModa to do it. And that,
Oh, man.
the rest is history. But if you want somebody who is of professional caliber, who's actually been in business and done the kind of work that you'd want, for instance, audits to be done right, well, then you'd want somebody from maybe a major auditing firm who actually knows how to do this stuff. Well,
Right.
they don't make $77,000 a year
Yeah.
doing that. So anyway, and I think that, like you said, we can have a debate in the legislature.
Yeah.
It's paying the legislature more is that's like the self-dealing thing that really gets.
The other thing that concerns me with this one, and then we can move on. We're a citizen legislature by design. Our legislators come from working in their communities. They go and serve on a part-time basis. They go back to their communities. So there's always that connection. And I think that's vital. I think that's what we want. What I'm concerned about is if you take this and you jack up to make the legislative salaries a full-time or more than full-time salary equivalent, we're going to end up with a permanent legislative class that is disconnected from the people that they serve. And I'm just opposed to that.
Yeah.
So, and I say that knowing I'm working way harder than I'm getting paid.
Yeah.
But I did it. I made a conscious decision to do that. So anyway, yeah, I don't want a permanent legislative class. I don't want a year-round legislature, but I guarantee that's what will come out of it if we do this.
Yeah, and you'll end up also with the dreaded career politician thing where
I'm saying it a fancy way. Yes.
Yeah.
Career politician.
Yeah, career politicians, and you also end up with people that think that because they're being paid and they keep winning, that their job is to make more laws, when actually maybe your job is to get rid of some.
Yeah.
Or stop making them, you
Right.
know?
Yep.
Certainly, in some cases, it would be to seize power back from the executive branch. And yet, sometimes that symbiosis between the executive branch and the legislative branch has also been a problem. Like,
Mhm.
career politicians love that stuff, right?
Yeah.
We need people who live under the laws that they make. Well, good. That's a good one. So, measure 117.
17. Well, you and I have talked a lot about this one. I am a hard no on that. I've been doing a number of debates and forums around the state on this. I've got one with Braver Angels tomorrow. That'll be a virtual one that people. I posted on my social media and in my email how you can register for that event. And then I did one debate in Multnomah County. I did the one with the Oregonian. It was part of a panel. They made, I think, the right decision and are recommending a no vote on it. And then I also just recently did a debate panel with Willamette Week. Their editorial board has not made a decision yet, to my knowledge. So we'll see where that goes. But some other things that have come up since you and I talked on that one, Kevin, is the more and more money has been dumped into this thing. Well over $4 million.
$4 million.
$4 million. And in the debates, they always say this is a grassroots effort. And I'm saying, okay, then you tell me where all this money's coming from. And they would never respond to me because they're funneling the money through a 501c4 corporation. We can't see who the donors are. Willamette Week just did an article today. Somebody just posted it. Awesome. Oh, you did. Yeah, cash pours in. And they admitted in that article, the proponents said, yeah, the money's coming from out of state. So we have millions of dollars coming in from out of state to pass this. I think that we're putting up the fight is grassroots. Our side is a grassroots side in opposition to this thing. And I
Yes.
think they're worried about that. That's why they're continuing to dump more money in it. They've got this big mailer campaign and text campaign going on. And Kevin, you have called this the Measure 110 of elections reform.
Yeah.
You've been sharing that, and people get it. People get it.
Yeah. It's somebody in another state with a bad idea that's never worked. And by the way, when we've done this before and talked about it, there's all these very, very deep blue liberal bastions that once had ranked choice voting, and they dumped it
Yeah.
because it turned out to be so confusing, so difficult. It even caused the vote exhaustion issue of people that were least able to cope with it. So low income, people that might have lesser levels of education, minorities were the ones most impacted and saw their votes discarded at the highest rate.
Yeah, there's so many issues. There's inherent flaws if you look at the science behind all these different kinds of election systems. There's just some inherent flaws in ranked choice voting, and they came out with an Alaska race. They've come out in these other races across the country. Then you've got what you said. I call that disenfranchisement, where people are more prone to make errors with ranked choice voting ballots, and it's disproportionately impacting people with lower income and less education. It's completely unfair in that regard.
Yeah,
Plus,
and there's an example that Republicans should take note of, but I think based on what we said about happening in all these other towns, everybody should take note of it.
Yeah.
Most people think that the majority rules, and that you're going to end up with, if there's a blue state, by and large, you're going to have Democrats elected unless somebody breaks through and makes the case strongly. But, there's some decent reliability to that. Somebody's able to try and wants to spend the money and finds the right, combo. You do have, red state Democrat governors, blue state Republican governors. You got that kind of thing, right? But what we saw happen in Alaska was an absurdity of a state that typically votes for president to the tune of 60 to 70% Republican, and then elected a statewide congressional seat as a Democrat in the last election, which when it was because ranked choice voting was implemented just in time for that to take place. And now it's on the ballot this time in Alaska to get rid of it. So
a grassroots effort to get rid of it, and millions of dollars of out-of-state money pouring in to keep it in place. And that Alaska, the best way to explain one of the flaws with ranked choice voting is that Alaska election, you had a candidate that would have beat the other two opponents in a head-to-head competition. I think they call that a concorsate winner. He would have beat the other opponents in a head-to-head competition, but he was eliminated in the first round of ranked choice. And you say, well, that's just an anomaly. It's really rare. Well, it's not really that rare when you have 3 or more candidates and you have some strong candidates. It can happen by maybe up to as much as 7% of the elections in those scenarios. So it's a real issue. It's a fatal flaw. And the other thing that's related to that, Kevin, is you have this thing called the center squeeze effect, where the proponents will say, well, this will lead to more moderate candidates and more moderate winners. It doesn't. It leads to more polarization. Ranked choice voting leads to more polarized elections and leads to extreme candidates getting elected.
Yes.
And
because in some cases they can do it with far less than a majority, right?
And it's a fact of how ranked choice voting works. And here's and if you question that, well, tell me why the Green Party and the Communist Party and George Soros and other very progressive folks would be supporting this and dumping millions of dollars into it in a state that's already progressive. Do you think they want more Republicans elected? Do you think they want more moderates elected in Oregon? No. They are doing it because they fully expect to get more of these extreme progressive candidates elected in Oregon. That's why it's worth dumping millions of dollars into Oregon.
By the way, I'm going to post here also. You mentioned about the Oregonian taking similar positions. I'm posting their editorial on 115. They agreed with you on.
They have one of their pages has a summary of, I think, of all their votes.
They do, yeah.
Great.
And then 116 I just posted. Vote no, they said, on the legislature's accountability dodge. 117 I've already posted what they said. 118 they have also come out against, and so far you know this is something when the Oregonian is lining up with a conservative on the same way.
I'll tell you, I'd never gone through the process before with them until this 117 editorial panel, and I was very impressed with their questions. They were informed. They were asking very probing questions to us, and I could tell there was a level of healthy skepticism on this. And you read their editorials, and they're pretty thoughtful. So I appreciated the effort that they put into this.
That's good. That's what really is the best way for our republic to function, is a vigorous, healthy public debate.
Yeah.
And then people speak out and take positions and influence others. We can see when it's been missing, and Measure 110 is a great example of how that debate was missing, and we got a super duper stinker. Now, Measure 119, I have to admit, this is the one I don't know much about. And a lot of people might say, who cares? I'll just vote for it. But this one, why don't you give a little intro there, and I'll also put what the Oregonian did, which agreed with you.
So I have not I haven't dug into this one as much as the others, but what I can tell you is on its face, uh, I'm opposed to it simply because it requires businesses to remain neutral if a party comes in to try and unionize their workforce. I think that's denying the business their free speech rights. As a former business owner or current business owner, I think I have a right to speak up and voice my opinion on a unionization effort. And this isn't being against unions. It's just, hey, that these things need to be discussed, and the business owner should have a say in that and be able to speak his mind. So that's where I'm coming from on it. I also think this may be a test run to force unions on the broader agricultural community.
Yeah.
And frankly, what's going on is union membership is in decline. It's in rapid decline, and they're grasping to do things. I see it in the legislature all the
The
time.
private sector unions, and it's also to use
Yeah.
government power, the
Right.
licensing of these businesses as a way to force the businesses to comply, which
Yep.
is a very ominous thing.
Yeah.
It's one thing for people to have a right to discuss whether they want to organize and form a union. It's another thing to essentially silence and cancel the voice of the businesses that
Right.
are trying to do business as to whether or not they're what they think about it. So, yeah, there we go. I think that, and by the way, I saw this play out. There was a recall of Representative Paul Holvey in Eugene that was
Yeah.
launched by the United Food and Commercial Workers, a local 555, that pushed this as a bill in the legislature. And they say the bill died, and they blamed Paul Holvey for it. They tried to recall him. It didn't work. The recall failed, but he's decided not to run again. So,
Yeah.
you know, these are little battles going on behind the scenes, but
It's pretty amazing because the unions lost one of their hugest champions
yeah,
uh, because he didn't do exactly what they wanted, I guess.
it
I
was
don't
an
know the
overreach
details,
for
but
sure. Yeah.
huge overreach.
So I think when we talked about what we were covering tonight, we said that we'd cover the measures, and so we've just done the 5 measures and shared with everyone your handy list. And I hopefully everybody can see that, but now you also have the information. Let me go ahead and take that off of the screen now and just put us back up there. Oh, you should be bigger. Let me see if I can fix that. Sometimes I don't know why it does that, because I don't want to be that big. I'm not that big. But here we go. There we go.
They are.
And we talked about what was happening with our election system in Oregon. I
Yeah.
think we also said that there's issues that are going to shape this election going into the fall for the state legislature. What are your highlights on that one as we kind of wrap up here?
Oh, what's coming up in the legislature?
Well, no, what you see in the battle for the state house and state senate.
Oh, yeah.
And there's also an AG's race, and I know you're aware of the congressional races. I gave a little update last night on House Congressional District 4, 5, and 6, which are the ones that are at stake.
Well, I can't get into some of the stuff that I know. I had an update before I got on the phone or on this call with you, Kevin, but I can say that I'm optimistic. I mean, I fully expect if we continue to push through to the finish line on this, I mean we're going to pick up some seats. I feel it, and my optimism is based on the fact we have some awesome candidates that are working their butt off. I see a general trend within the voters that are really fed up with a lot of things going on in the state. And for example, I'm hearing from some people who are lifelong Democrats who are voting for a Republican for the first time. And so we just need to give them a good reason to vote Republican. and I see that. So I fully expect that we're going to pick up a couple seats, and my focus has been on the House. My
Yep.
focus has been on the House,
Which is where you are.
yeah.
And
So we'll hold the 4 seats. There's some seats that are at risk
yeah,
that the Democrats are coming at us pretty hard on. I fully expect we'll hold those seats and we'll pick up 2 more.
there's some pretty crappy candidates that they have too. I think
Yeah.
the one running against Kevin Mannix seems pretty awful.
Oh, she's very extreme. She was the spearhead for the payroll tax that went down in flames.
Yeah, at the ballot box.
She voted to reduce the police presence and divert some of those funds toward DEI, I think. She voted against a low-income housing program because it would have required people to drive to downtown instead of walk. She's just got a lot of she's taken some really bad decisions on the city council, so I don't think she'll survive.
So it's time for her to pay a price for that. But of course, you got to do things like support Kevin Mannix and make sure that he has the resources to get the word out.
He needs the resources to get the word out. Tracy Kramer needs help. Leader Jeff Helfrich needs help. Leader Cyrus Javity needs help. Those are the 4 races that are, I'd say, are at risk. But again, they're doing all the right things. They're doing all the right things. And
well, and there was I'm sure you probably heard about this story, but there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot still going haywire in our state. And the one thing that really caught my attention just the other day was this crazy story that the head of the Oregon Forest Fire,
oh my gosh, yeah,
has been suspended because some woman filed a complaint against him saying he was using merit, the ability to do the job, instead of somebody's race or gender identity to decide whether to hire them.
You just can't make this up. Yeah, they hired a DEI director that was absolutely toxic, and chastised them, yes, for using merit to promote. But Kevin, you're reading about it in the Department of Forestry. This is in every agency, and people are being promoted that don't know how to do their job. And I've heard it from some folks on the inside. You'll elevate somebody to be in charge of finances for a certain area, and they don't know how to read the financial reports. It's really it's going to get worse before it gets better, and that's why I've been promoting. I'm for abolishing all of these DEI positions. It approaches about $100 million a year we spend on DEI. That doesn't count. That's just state agencies. Okay.
Wow.
And a lot of positions aren't even filled. So it's a lot of money. And it's just producing a toxic environment. We've got people working hard workers in these agencies. They just can't wait to get out. And
the good people are going to leave. That's the other thing, is that this stuff actually causes really good people who just want to do their job.
Yeah.
And have other people that will do the job working with them to leave. I mean, and we have serious issues with forest fires in this state, and this is what they're doing.
This is their focus. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And we have to, I feel nationally, people are finally waking up. A lot of these corporations are dumping their programs entirely. We have to keep the pressure on in Oregon to dump it. I think it needs more attention than it gets by legislators. Some legislators are just not comfortable speaking out about it. I feel compelled to speak out about it. It's awful.
I think that it starts somewhere and it grows, and maybe this type of a story, because people die in forest fires.
Yeah.
People lose everything in forest fires, and and we breathe the smoke. And there's so many things that are wrong with how we're handling our forests and mismanaging them, but we don't need this in addition.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Lori is right there. Lori's correct. Yeah.
I've seen many times when a good employee is pushed out and DEI staff remain when they're nowhere capable to. Yeah, so it's worse than just adding somebody who can't do their job. You're forcing out people that can do the job, and you're left with incompetence, deadly incompetence in some cases. And we have, but look, let's remember that this is part of the backlash. We need to make sure people know that this stuff really happens. It's not a fantasy. And you said $100 million. You're talking some real money at the state level.
It's real. It's real money. It's real money, and it's going to create toxic work environments. It's diverting people from their main objective. What's the mission of this agency? It's and we wonder why we don't have any agency accountability, and why we don't feel like we're getting a return for our investment, our tax investment in the state.
Yeah.
And this is why.
Yeah. Well, we can also elect really good Republicans and keep the ones that we have and start to change this, because it's very possible to change the direction here and to send a strong message. So, but I think we just did a nice public service here today, and I want to thank you for being on, because a lot of people get stuck on these measures, and they would like a short study guide. And that's what sounds like. They can watch this show, and they just got all their answers, and they got infotained too, by the way.
And I'm happy if people want to reach out to me via email, or my phone number is also on my website, eddiehl.com, eddiehl.com. You can also find my links to follow me on social media. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions people have. And I've been doing meet and greets. I call them ballots and brews.
Ballots and brews.
Ballots and brews. Go in and talk about these measures, plus candidates. And people have been really appreciative of it, because it is a lot to take on. And some of these are really complicated ballot measures.
There are. And you have to do a lot of reading, and you can still sit down and read it all and say, I don't know. I still don't know.
I know.
And it delays. We found people turning in their ballot, when actually, if you want to make life easier for Republicans trying to get elected, who have a fraction of the resources the other side has for, say, get out the vote, make it easier for us to get your vote out by turning it in as soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
And then and by the way, we also, it stops the phone calls and the messages that you get, because we only send it to people who haven't voted yet.
Because here's what happens as a candidate. I know we have data the Secretary of State provides on a regular basis, who's voted and who hasn't. I can't tell how you voted, but I will know that this household voted. That's one more household, like you said, Kevin. I don't have to phone. I don't have to call. I don't have to knock on their door. I can focus on those households that we know we need to win. So it's important.
And the ones that we need to talk to that might not vote can make the difference. The 200 votes that you talked about in one of those races in 2022, that could have easily been, if 200 people had not wasted our time and turned in their ballots, we could have spent time on those 201.
Like John Masterman is running against Wah Wen. John Masterman lost by about 900 votes, and he says, "Man, I'm coming back at it. I'm coming back at it." He's working that district hard. He's doing a great job. He's running a great campaign, and it's 900 votes difference. I think they even know what 900 doors they need to knock on.
Yeah, that's really just a few neighborhoods
to make that change. Yeah,
a few neighborhoods. Well, again, thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. And always, you're masterfully informative, and you break it down for everyone in a way that they can all understand. I know everybody appreciates it a lot. So,
well, thanks, Kevin. And anytime, you bet.
And please, everyone, share this show with everyone you can, because it can't be your little secret. You got to let folks know, because they're sitting around asking for these answers, and we have them. And we even make it somewhat entertaining when we talk about it. So, but thanks again for watching, and we look forward to the next episode of The Captive Audience tomorrow night. Sonny and Don will be back, and I promise you next week we'll have some good ones. I think I'm going to have Dave Huguenot on, who's going to talk. He always has interesting things to share about what's happening at the presidential race, insights that you can't get anywhere else. And he's due. It's been a couple of months, and in politics this year has been an absolute lifetime. It's been like 10 to 20 years, like decades, you know?
Yeah, this is wild. Yeah.